Okay, so I will start the Monday, August 2nd, Sonora City Council meeting and bring it to order at 4 p.m. And we're going to go closed session, so we will do roll call, please.
Mayor Hawkins?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Plummer?
Here.
Councilmember Segerstrom?
Here.
Councilmember Such?
Here.
With Councilmember Garaventa absent, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and we will look for any public comments. Don't see any, so we will adjourn into closed session. Yeah, we'll adjourn into closed session. Thank you, Chris. Okay, would like to call the Monday, August 2nd, 2021 meeting to order at 5 p.m. Just let everyone know from closed session, there was no action taken. Pledge of Allegiance, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I want to thank everyone for being here. This is great. We have people in City Hall again. I'm really thankful for that. Roll call, please.
Mayor Hawkins?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Plummer?
Here.
Councilmember Garaventa?
Here.
Councilmember Segerstrom? And she's muted, Mr. Mayor, but she did say here.
Okay.
And,
She's waving.
and Councilmember Such?
Here. I'm here.
Excellent. All five are here. Okay, City Clerk's report on agenda posting.
The agenda was posted on Thursday, July 29th at 4 p.m.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda. Anyone want to pull anything? Everything's good? Okay. Presentations. Receive a Tuolumne County update from District 1 Supervisor David Goldenberg. This is his first one in City Hall chambers.
It should be on.
Hopefully. So, good evening, members of the council and city manager. Appreciate the opportunity to speak again. And yes, this is the first time I've spoken in person. Been on a number of your other meetings online. So, get this thing turned so I can see my paper. Sorry. Status of the county. You know, one of the big things that we're looking at, as everybody's well aware, is the rapid rise in cases that we've had with the Delta variant. There's more severity. It's spreading very quickly. You know, sometimes 7-8 times or more as quickly. Just to give you a little perspective, in the last 2 weeks, actually a little bit under 2 weeks, we've had 260 community cases. So that's 260 cases that they don't know where they came from. So they're just open. Add on to that, down at the prison, the SCC inmates, 113, total of 373 cases. This equates to the same severity that we had during the winter, during January period. We've got 11 people in the hospital right now. We've got a case rate of 46. You know, just about 2.5 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, we were down under 5. So it's just a huge thing, you know. So just looking at this, you know, we're doing some things at the county, you know, level. We're requiring masks, you know, to come into the county building and to do business, and we ask people to respect that. You know, same thing for any of the offices or the board meetings. Vaccines, right? You know, so much of it really comes down to the vaccines or lack of people getting vaccinated. Again, some percentages, age 12 to 17, about 25% of them, you know, have gotten vaccinated, you know, with their parents', you know, permission. Age 18 to 49, 35%. 50 to 64, 55%. I'm sorry, 65%. And 65 plus about 70%. So what's happening is, you know, this age group, particularly the 18 to 49 is pretty problematic. And so that's quite honestly, it's encouraging, the spread to happen. Just not a whole bunch, more than I can say about COVID, except the importance of getting vaccinated. I know people have concerns. There's been a lot of tests and a lot of, studies that have done. And I think that they're, proven to be very safe and very effective, vaccination. Just talking about the county budget a little bit. So as you in the city are well aware, we went through some real struggles during COVID. We're now just starting to, resurface back out of that. The county budget is improving. We're actually able to restore some of the positions, where we had done some layoffs in recent years. The whole situation with the American Recovery Fund, that, the county got roughly 5.3 million. And we've got about 5 million left. We committed some to some code enforcement officers at Community Development Department. That was really needed. They're going after trash issues in the county, and we're well aware there's a lot of those. So we're trying to deal with that. We had a special meeting, about a week ago, and we've got a session tomorrow at 1:30. If anybody wants to participate and listen in on that. And then we're having budget hearing discussions for the rest of this week, every day. So each day there'll be a group of county departments. We start out the first day on Wednesday, essentially public safety, and then we move on to public health and that whole group, and then admin, on Friday. So at, budget times, they're trying, right? When we look at this, we look at the amount of funds that the county got, and we've got that 5 million now, and hopefully we will get the other 5.3 million next year as promised. I'll wait till I see it, till I really believe it. But, the concern is that we use those funds wisely. And so the county has taken a kind of a reserved approach on that and looking at it and trying to decide, we really don't want to use that as much as possible for ongoing expenses. One-time expenses is perfect use for those funds. We may do some, other things with it, but we really want to limit that. So other than that, that's pretty much what I have. Mainly it was the COVID stuff, and we're deep into budget stuff this week, but I'm happy to take your questions.
Councilmember Segestrom. Oh, hold on, you're still muted.
Okay, thank you, and I will lower my hand. Thank you very much for the report. I did tune in to the first budget session. That was it was very enlightening, although I didn't get too much farther than the sheriff. But you have your work cut out for you this week, and I will try and tune in. But I actually wanted to ask, and this is another committee that you and I share, but I'm really not related to the Tuolumne Utility District at all. But I was wondering if the county had any interest in helping TUD purchase the water rights, or if there, if there's no relationship between the two of you. I was just curious because one of the members keeps pointing out that TUD is doing it all by themselves. And I wondered if the county had any interest in that.
Yeah, so thanks, Ann. Absolutely, we do have an interest in that. The negotiations up to this point have been between TUD and PG&E. Quite honestly, the county has not officially been invited to the table to participate in that. We did have a joint session, which was the first time that had happened in many years between the board and TUD. And so we had a lot of good discussions, then when we all met. And, where we end up with it is unknown. Until we get to the point where they bring us in and, if we, whatever agreement or, disclosure things that we have to sign and non-disclosure or whatever, that's fine. We'll do that, but we can't We can't do that until they, officially invite us, to that point. I did have some discussions with some of the TUD board members and with Mr. Perkins, the new interim general manager, and he's aware of that. He wants to extend that out, and we're trying to work out some of the details, now. But it's very concerning, to myself personally. Where are we going to end up with the funding on this, right? Because I don't want to see the ratepayers take a big hit. I don't want to see the county end up being on the hook, for something that, we may not have control over in the future. So there's some decisions that have to be made. But
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Yeah,
you bet.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Segerstrom. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Supervisor Goldenberg.
You're quite welcome.
And welcome.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, public comment on non-agenda items. The public may address the council on any item of public interest not otherwise on the agenda that is within the jurisdiction of the city. No action may be taken. Matters to be addressed may be referred to city staff or placed on subsequent meeting agenda. Speakers are limited to a 3-minute presentation. And again, this is on anything that is not agenda,
Thank you.
non-agenda items.
Do you want me to introduce myself or just begin?
If you want to, go for it.
Suzanne Cruz.
Yes.
Duty. I, like those listening and present, elected city council people to do the work I do not have the time to do. I have it on very good authority that some are neglecting their job and discussing nefarious things. I am speaking of critical race theory. Webster's defines a city councilman's job as thus: elected legislative body with the authority to pass municipal ordinances and budgets and make appropriations and set local tax rates. Nowhere in the dictionary does it say to legislate morality. For those in the audience who do not know what critical race theory is, imagine you own a shop. 2 customers come in at the same time. One is white, one is black. Who do you help first? If you help the black person first, critical race theory would say that you did so because you don't trust the black people can be left alone in your store. That's racist. If you help the white person first instead, critical race theory would say you did so because you believe blacks are second-class citizens. That's racist too. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is critical race theory. It can find racism in anything, even if it has to read your mind to do it. CRT is a uniquely American invention, brewed up at Harvard Law School in the 70s and now part of the academic and media mainstream. It is also uniquely un-American because it rejects the classical liberal Judeo-Christian value system. Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanik, 2 leading proponents, admit, quote, CRT questions the very foundations of liberal order, equity theory, legal reasoning, and Enlightenment rationalism. It does this because CRT assumes that racism is present everywhere, and they look for it critically until they find it, and they always find it. Duty. When I was a deputy sheriff, I did my duty, even though it was tough sometimes seeing children live in squalor in the deep recesses of our Stanislaus National Forest. My daughter does her duty as an Air Force captain training fighter pilots. My Hispanic husband did his duty as a prison guard. My father did his duty at the construction of the Stephen O. Bridge, which everyone here enjoys to this day. Freedom is not the idea of doing what you want to do. It's about doing what's right. Duty is the obligation we all have to contribute to this free society. What does my vote mean when council members deviate from their duties into the territory of tyrannical social engineering, virtue signaling, and shaming their constituents? I am here to remind you of your duty. Do not dare push this Marxist agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, jump.
Hello, welcome.
Hi. So this one's for you, Megan. I'm here today because I wanted to speak up, but I'm really disappointed in the fact that you are able to have 2 of your council members on Zoom and your lawyer, but the rest of the general public can't be on Zoom anymore. And you have somebody here running it, so it's not about having no staff to do it. And I really think that's unfair to our community. Many of them you heard what was going on, and many of them are not comfortable coming here, and you're actually leaving them out of our democracy. And I'm super disappointed about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh,
Hello, everyone. Richard Todd, licensed land surveyor, City of Sonora. I'm here to speak about CRT and why it's really a bad idea. A major step in the healing of racist wounds of the 1960s occurred under the leadership of Martin Luther King. His epic words during his I Have a Dream speech can be compared in importance to Thomas Jefferson's of the Declaration of Independence. King's words are now being trampled and discarded by those who would attempt to continue racial tensions rather than subdue them. Can any of you tell me what those words were? I'm sure you all can. They were, a man, not gender specific, is to be judged by the content of his character and not by the color of his skin. He was referring to any black, brown, yellow, red, and yes, even white man or woman. The reference was clearly aimed at the individual and not the group. Your misguided CRT agenda is not based upon individuals. It is based upon group identity. The problem comes because the idea of content of character can only apply to an individual and not a group. What does this mean? Well, it means that groups are unable to display content of character as that's only an individual characteristic. Do a little critical thinking here. The CRT agenda, therefore, being based upon a group identity, i.e. skin color, is in and of itself racist, anti-American. If implemented, it will pick at the racist wound that Martin Luther King began to heal with his words. Reverse all the good that was started and make a sham of real racial progress. And disparaging the memory of a great man who, much like our Revolutionary War heroes, died for his cause.
thank you. Anyone else? And just so the public knows, council, when we had Mr. Goldenberg up, that's because he was agendized, and that's where we could ask questions or show support. When there's public comment on non-agenda items, we're not allowed to ask any questions. So just so everyone knows. So
I'm curious on the council, a sitting member used their power to change an agenda for their personal gain, and I'm wondering if that's ethically wrong, morally wrong, and I probably won't get a response for it, but that's simply my question.
yeah, unfortunately, we can't make any comments at this time. So there's so many times I wish we could, but okay. So is there anyone else that would like to do any public comment on non-agenda items? So, okay. Moving forward, consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar considered routine and will be voted on in one motion unless a council member or a member of the public has a question or wishes to discuss an item. In that case, the item will be removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. Just one item, so I'm going to read it off. Approval of disbursements in the amount of $234,410.43 for payroll, inclusive of employee salaries, employer and employee taxes, and retirement contributions, miscellaneous voluntary employee deductions, holiday pay, and other adjustments. Any council discussion on this? Oh, Councilmember Sagestrom.
It just seemed, the amount, the $234,410 seems extraordinarily higher than it normally is. You know, $50,000 is it all attributable to these salaries and taxes and retirement contributions, et cetera? Or is there some special bump this particular pay period?
In the first full payroll of July, there are what they call holiday cash outs. All 4 bargaining units of the city have negotiated to have unused holiday cashed out, and it happens on this check.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Sagerstrom, that's listed in the agenda report as well.
Oh, it is? Okay,
Yes.
sorry.
That's right.
Excellent. Okay, any other council member questions before I ask for public comment? Is there any public comment on this matter? Okay, we bring it back to the council for a motion and a second.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Garaventa, second by Mayor Pro Tem Plummer. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Huckins,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Plummer,
Aye.
Councilmember Garaventa,
Aye.
Councilmember Segerstrom,
Aye.
and Councilmember Such.
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-0. On to public hearings. Motion to approve first reading and introduction of ordinance number 880, reading by title only, waiving further reading and ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sonora, amending Chapter 17.64 Transient Use Permit.
Good evening,
Mayor Rose.
council members. The item before you, as you just stated, Mayor Hawkins, is a motion to approve the first reading and introduction of ordinance number 880. This item has actually, this will be the 6th time in which an item in regards to your transient use permit program has come before your city council for public discussion. Just to reiterate those dates for the public's knowledge, the council spoke on March 15th, April 5th, May 3rd, June 21st. We had it in front of the Planning Commission on the 12th of July, and this is now the 6th meeting on August 2nd. The item before you again is ordinance 880. We had introduced this to the council on June 21st as a draft to the city council, asking at that time if there was any additional input before the draft of the ordinance went before the planning commissioners. At that time, the city council members did not have any additional direction for staff. So I'll just kind of go in a little bit of detail just to members of the public and the city council what the ordinance actually addresses. As we know, the goal setting back in February 22nd, the city council directed staff to address our long-term housing affordability issues in the city, as well as homelessness issues. And then back in March, the council directed staff to bring back an ordinance to limit the number of short-term rentals in the city of Sonora, noticing the correlation between short-term rentals and the lack of the ability of long-term rentals. So the ordinance before you, as I said, it is the same. There's no difference between what was presented on June 21st. It limits all new short-term rentals within the city of Sonora, so that 3 square mile radius, to permanent residency only. So you're limiting your short-term rentals to your primary residency where the homeowner actually lives. We talked about limiting the amount of unhosted short-term rental days in which the homeowner can rent out that short-term rental without being occupied within the residency. So it's limited to 245 days of the calendar year in which the homeowner needs to be there within the residency. There is a prohibition on special events for your short-term rentals. So special events such as weddings, commercial functions, similar events. We had talked about ensuring that preserving your residential neighborhoods to preserve that residential character. So that prohibition on special events is why that is there. We had talked about issues with on-site parking, or excuse me, with off-street parking. And we had talked about putting a requirement of on-site parking in the ordinance. That is in this ordinance for you as well. It requires that all short-term rentals provide on-site parking for guests if available. We know there are some situations in the downtown area in which on-site parking is not doable for some of our short-term rental hosts. So it is allowed on a case-by-case basis for staff to address whether or not those on-site parking requirements can or cannot be met. As per the last ordinance or the current ordinance, it does require a local contact person, designating a local contact person who can respond and take action on complaints regarding the short-term rental. We talked extensively about the fire safety regulations that needed to be incorporated in the short-term rental ordinance. That is there as well, not only requiring that short-term rentals conform to all fire safety requirements that are required from hotels, your bed and breakfasts, but also ensuring that they have an annual fire safety inspection, and that will be completed by your Sonora Fire Department. We're talking about trash collection. Trash collection is in this ordinance as well. Short-term rentals will be required to obtain trash collection services through our solid waste franchisee holder. And then one of the biggest changes we have is, aside from the primary residency change, is the enforcement mechanism. The current ordinance does not allow for an enforcement mechanism. Staff has noticed does not have the ability to currently enforce the ordinance as it stands. Once a year, we send out notifications to those short-term rental operators who do not have permits. About 10 we've seen over the last year do not comply with those letters that the city sends out. This would would allow the city staff to be able to assess fines for those that are operating outside the confines of the ordinance. And then it also addresses an amnesty period and an exemption period for your current short-term rental permit holders. So the exemption portion would be, we know that the majority of our current permit holders do not have a primary residency ability within their short-term rentals. Only about a third of our current short-term rental permit holders actually use their short-term rental within their primary residency. So this would exempt them. Now the amnesty period would give 90 days for those current permit holders to come into compliance with the other elements of this ordinance, requiring that they come into compliance with fire safety regulations, trash collections, on-site parking, and so forth. But again, once again, the exemption would be for that primary residency. We understand that they wouldn't be allowed to meet that requirement. I will say from a staff perspective, we have personally contacted every current permit holder, personally spoken to every current permit holder to ensure that they are aware of the ordinance coming down, potentially if the council so chooses. And we have walked them through what the different elements are, ensuring that they can come into good standing so that they can maintain their current permit. So we only had one that did not choose to renew their current permit. All the rest came in, renewed, and they are in good standing right now. So I just wanted to convey that to the council. As always, we talk about the vacancies of rentals within the city. Staff has noticed that within the last couple of weeks, we've seen about 4 vacancies within the city of Sonora. As always, they fluctuate, you know, who's coming, who's going. I did just want to kind of reiterate the price range that we're seeing for these rentals. We're noticing mostly 1-bedroom studio apartments for rent. We saw rent ranging from about $900 a month all the way up to past 21, sometimes cases $2,400 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment. And I also wanted the council to be aware of Placer County just voted this last July to approve an urgency ordinance putting a moratorium on all new Airbnbs because they are having the same situation within the Lake Tahoe Basin while they look at rewriting their short-term rental ordinance. I know the council is very intrigued and wanting to be aware of what's going on around the state as far as short-term rentals and also what the housing market looks like here in the city of Sonora. So at this time, I will entertain any questions from the city council.
Anyone want to go first? Or I can ask for public comment.
Oh, actually, Mayor Hawkins, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I know Rochelle Kellogg is available to address the Planning Commissioner's 3-2 vote that on July 12th, just to provide additional information for the council in that regard.
Thank you. As the city administrator mentioned, there was a 3-2 vote on this item with the Planning Commission, with Commissioners Grinnell and Opie voting against the recommendation of the approval of the council, and the other 3 remaining commissioners recommending approval by the council. They did ask that we make you aware of some of their concerns of the ones that voted against it. Unfortunately, they don't have another meeting before this meeting, and so the minutes have not been approved yet. So I just wanted to go over a couple items that they did bring up because we told them that we would, and I like to stand by my words, so I wanted to make sure you guys are aware of it. Most concerns were expressed by Commissioner Grinnell, but some of the other commissioners did have some other questions and needed some clarification as well, so we did address that. There was a concern expressed about the amount of the penalties, the costs associated with that. There was also a concern about not allowing within the commercial zones if there was some type of a housing unit that wouldn't make a traditional housing unit that would be rented for a long term, if there would be an option to allow that. I'm not exactly sure what type of format that unit would be, but that is something they talked about. They also talked about ADUs and the restriction on ADUs and only allowing them with junior ADUs. And so that was a question on that as to why that wasn't being allowed. And I think that was their the main issues that came up during that meeting. And then they also said they would want, again, this is mainly coming from Commissioner Grinnell, to expand it to allow those that live in the area to have an ADU, a short-term rental, not necessarily requiring it to be that they live at the same place where the ADU or the short-term rental is. So I said that I would make you guys aware of the comments that were made. Of course, the video is available on YouTube, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you. Okay, any council member questions or comments before I turn it over to public comment? Okay, then I will ask for public comment.
Hi, Lori Lehman. I am a Airbnb host for 2 different kinds of housing. And just so you know, Michelle, I have not been contacted yet about the changes on either of my Airbnbs.
You had renewed, you had officially had renewed.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
so you were in good standing already, Lori.
Okay. So I just wanted to come and say, I'm pretty sure that you were hoping no one was going to complain about this ordinance. After all the people that are grandfathered in will have no reason to complain. I mean, I've sat at home through this whole 6 times process so far and haven't said anything because I'm exempt. But I just can't sit back anymore, and I have to speak on behalf of our visitors. Some of our visitors are looking for a local type of experience. They don't want to go to a hotel or a bed and breakfast or a room in a house. I know this from experience for when I travel. They want to feel like a local, living in a house, walking to town, going out to dinner, partaking of our arts and culture. Who knows, these guests may end up buying a house downtown and living here full time. How many renters necessarily need to live downtown? This is a big county. Where is our workforce and where are their needs? Our businesses are all small family owned. They don't need rentals. Why is it on the backs of private property owners to supply the rentals? Why didn't you take up the opportunity to solicit a developer to build a housing complex instead of a bank up in South Washington Street? Now we'll have another building downtown that's empty. And you had that big piece of land that could have been turned into a nice housing complex. You choose to target small businesses in our tourist destination, and I think that's unkind. I'm also pretty sure that nothing anyone says will have any effect on your decision here today, but I just had to speak up. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, whoever wants to come up next. I keep staring at Darren because he's right in the middle.
Good afternoon, good evening. Chris Garnon, I'm a local real estate broker. Some of you might remember me as a past member of the Planning Commission too.
I think I remember you one time. I think we talked one time.
I have some comments, just some general comments and some concerns to express about the city's oversight on the number and availability of short-term residential rentals. I have not read the ordinance. I've just seen snippets from newspaper articles and from what I've heard, but I'm sure there's merit to some aspects of the ordinance, but relative to available parking, trash removal, basic management responsibilities of the property owners. I think there's a lot of merit to that, but to limit the number of available properties for short-term rentals for the sake of creating more long-term housing stock, rental housing stock, I think is flawed. I think it's basically a civic reaction to a robust housing market fueled by extremely low long-term interest rates and, ladies and gentlemen, COVID. COVID is here. COVID has changed the way we do things and the way we operate. And Sonora is certainly not isolated in its response or reaction to COVID matters with regards to housing. Sonora is perceived as an attractive foothill community enjoyed by a vibrant tourist economy, and we don't extract resources anymore, so recreational tourism is a major building block in our community. We've adopted ordinances before, one specifically inclusionary zoning ordinance. And I gotta tell you, for 10 years now, have not been witness to one unit having been built under the IZO. And its intent was great, but it's fallen down. And there's a number of reasons for that, but I won't go into all that. So ordinances don't necessarily cure the workload that we have. They're a reaction to what problems we're faced with. But so the short-term rentals have been around for many years, and they offer a homeowner flexibility of personal use balanced with the generation of income to cover debt and operating expenses to maintain their property. And if you have a short-term rental, you have to maintain it in order to be competitive in the market. You offer good product, that's good for your neighborhood. Short-term rentals were around when there was a glut of long-term rentals in this town. I've been selling real estate here a long time. I've gone through very high vacancy factor economies, times when you couldn't give a rental house away, and short-term rentals were around then. They did not affect that market then. I know I'm coming up to time. But they basically don't influence long-term market swings. They basically fill in gaps for owners and renters themselves. They're an efficient use of one's property to maximize the purpose of that housing stock. Resort visitors enrich the local economy by shopping, eating. I'm out.
Yes, sir.
You're going to cut me off? I got about maybe another 20 seconds.
If I don't, I have to.
I know you got to do it to everybody else.
Yeah. I do appreciate your feedback.
All right. Anyway, be careful of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this matter?
Good afternoon, Council. Yeah, I mean, I think there has been a lot of discussion with this topic, right, in multiple meetings. And while some of the points that have been brought up are very true and very important, I think it's important to note that on the side of the groups that, are seeing that we have limited housing, well, it is true that moving forward with this will not solve the housing issue. It is important to note that if we don't regulate and protect the small housing availabilities that are, it will worsen the issue, right? So until major steps like more houses are produced or a more limiting rental cap or, any solutions for the current housing problem, until something major is addressed, this is something that also needs to kind of be delayed, right? We're in the same fight, right? So if the bigger issue is a housing issue, until that housing issue is resolved, we shouldn't make things worse. So having a cap on the availability of rentals, having certain limitations on it is good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so I will bring it back to the council. Bring it back to the council at 5:39 and ask for any council member comment or questions. Looks like Councilmember Segestrom has her hand up.
I would just like to submit a few points in support of the ordinance until we forge another path to affordable housing. I think, people are kind of overlooking the fact, or overlooking the demographics of the county. I mean, we skew senior and low income, and it's not having any affordable housing within the city or even within the county. It pushes employees out. Someone spoke about, people at the edge of the forest, but it's we need to have I know Mark doesn't like this word, but we need to have equitable housing. And so demographics is one thing. I think the city of Sonora responsibilities and capabilities is another. We're a small city. We have, limited funds and staff, and our first mandate is public safety. This year we'll have relief funds, but we have to backfill critical accounts and start on badly needed capital improvements, such as a downtown bathroom. I mean, we really don't have funds to go out and develop properties. I haven't really seen that many developers running around looking for space for low income housing. And perhaps this is something that the city council needs to put on their agenda for later to discuss how to attract developers for low income housing. But, our economic downturns have forced reduction in staff. We currently have 2 community development employees that handle all the planning, permitting, approvals, project management, code enforcement, grant writing, among other duties. I just can't see that that we're going to be able to speed up permitting or anything else in the near future. As far as developable parcels, the city is largely hilly terrain. We don't have anywhere to build unless we annex property from the county. In addition, and I thank Mary Rose for these statistics, we haven't increased our building fees since 1999. They are one of the lowest in the state. And the developments that we do have in motion are quote unquote move up homes that will sell from $400,000 to $600,000. So, and as far as TOT tax is concerned, I think it's a welcome source of revenue, but it's not a silver bullet for developing housing. And we also have to look at state mandates. RENA guidelines dictate the number of affordable housing homes that the state would like to see in incorporated cities. And most cities are still far behind that mark. So in my view, while this ordinance is not ideal, it's a strategic effort to solve a chronic situation. I also feel that we can revise, reverse, amend the ordinance if it doesn't achieve our goals.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Sagestrom. Anyone else?
I will, if no one else wants to speak, then I will, because I argued at great length. It took almost an hour at our last meeting when we discussed it. Am I on? I can't, okay. And my contention was that predictability was something that we should be making every effort to provide for our business community. I voted against it at that point because I was hoping to change that. I will support it now. It's going to pass. I think that it will be doing some good things, but I would like to ask that we bring it back in 2 years to see what the effect has been, and if it has in fact been useful. It's quite normal for us to just pass something and then it strays from memory and oversight. I think we ought to bring this back and look at it. Different points by different participants have at least shown that we could be in error. I hope that this does improve our housing stock for rentals, but we need to see what the actual results are and work on that. So, but since I'm changing my vote, I wanted to explain a little bit why I was doing that to the public, if and when they care.
Thank you. Councilmember Such.
Thanks. My vote is unchanged, although I understand that this ordinance isn't perfect, but I'd like to support everything Ann said and everything Mark just said. I think, Mark, it's wise to actually put this on the agenda to revisit in the future when we've given it enough time to see if it's met our needs or if it's meeting our needs. And that's all I have to say. I just want to thank Ann and Mark for their comments.
Councilmember Garaventa.
So one thing that Ann said I think is very important that we need to do is to, we've been spending all this time talking about the moratorium and doing an ordinance to regulate the regulate short-term housing, but we really haven't discussed ways to encourage somehow rental property production in the city. And I think Ann hit it on the head when she said that we need to agendize that as a council to talk about that.
Agreed, that would make a lot more difference.
Right. I mean, we should be, yeah, obviously we should be doing that as well. I like the idea of bringing it back at some point. I don't know, 2 years, if it's maybe sooner than that. You know, we should kind of at least review it sooner than that, actually, I think. Yeah, it's not a perfect ordinance, but it's you know, when you have when your vacancy rate for rental housing is nearing 0, you have a problem. I work retail. I work every day with people that are barely getting by, have no rental property or exorbitant amount they have to pay to do that. We need to find solutions to that. I did read the 2 Care letter, and I understand a lot where they're coming from, but I also, a lot of the solutions that they offer are either breaks in regulations, which I think we are one of the lowest regulated jurisdictions. We have to follow what the state policies would have to lessen before we could have less regulations. I mean, you know, we don't add on as much. Certainly other jurisdictions do. So, you know, that's an issue. Other issues are about acquiring property or going in on solutions with, you know, monetary solutions with nonprofits or whatever to purchase properties or to build houses. A, we don't have the money, and B, it would be gift of public funds. So, which is not legal. So, I mean, I'm sure there's other routes that we can find to try to get this going, but, you know, to rely on our tax base and the suggestion of TOT was designed for to remedy solutions that tourists bring in or transients bring into the community that aren't covered by regular property taxes, sales taxes, or whatever areas. I mean, there's not going to be any kind of money on top of that would be significant enough to put a dent in housing. We have to cover public safety for cost for when covering the tourists when they come here, you know, because there's no other way to recoup that. So that's kind of a misnomer too. So, but we definitely need to agendize and talk about solutions for long-term rental. I think that's next. That should be a priority soon for discussion.
So maybe we'll bring something like that up at the end of the meeting, and we'll see if we can agendize it.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Any other council members want to speak on this? I'll give my 2 cents here in just a second. I just want to make sure everybody else. So I like a lot of what's in here, and for the public's knowledge, and anyone that's going to be watching this streamed or anything else for that matter, one of the reasons that this was brought before us is because we had some bad actors. I'm not going to name them, but we had some bad actors really pushing really hard and doing a lot of the stuff, and we had to put an ordinance in place because they were not doing this with their short-term rentals. That was just a fact. So we were asked by many members of the public to put something together. I know I got a bunch of calls about that, I think a couple of emails. Again, for the most part, I'm for what's in this: trash collection, fire safety, local contact person. If I remember correctly, that's what was missing with a lot of these rentals. There would be a problem and we couldn't get a hold of anybody and that sort of thing. I'm not going to support this. This is not anything against city staff or the rest of the council. But I've also talked to a lot of our constituents, so I'll be that 1 in 5 that doesn't. I do have an issue with the unhosted part, because I think it could be actually done differently, to where somebody could essentially be renting part of the house and act as a host. That was something I brought up before, I believe. But again, it doesn't matter now. This is what's in front of us. So unless anyone has any other comments, I'll call for a motion in a second.
I did have a comment.
Oh, Councilmember Sagestrom.
I'm not sure exactly what you were referencing about the host, and but I did ask Mary Rose, and there is a prohibition against someone renting a long-term rental and then becoming an Airbnb host. So I believe that that is covered in the ordinance.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that that was what you were referencing. It sounded like it, but
Yeah, something along those lines, Councilmember. Okay. So unless there's any other discussion, looking for a motion and a second. Not all at once.
Move to approve the first reading and introduce ordinance number 880, reading by title only, waiving further reading, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Sonora, amending Chapter 17.64, Transient Use Permit.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion by Councilmember Garaventa, seconded by Councilmember Such. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Hawkins.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Plummer.
Aye.
Councilmember Garaventa.
Aye.
Councilmember Sagerstrom.
Aye.
And Councilmember Such.
Aye.
Okay, passes 4-1. And on to new business. Item number 6, consideration to approve a City of Sonora General Fund Reserve Policy. Mary Rose.
So, council members, this item is actually coming from both myself and your Administrative Services Director, Chris Gorski. This, again, just like the previous item, was presented to the City Council on June 21st as a draft for discussion and any other direction that the council would like before the formal document was before you today. At that time, we didn't have any additional comments from City Council. This was actually brought up during your goal setting session on February 22nd. The adopted 2021 goals and priorities listed prioritizing use of discretionary funds and creating a city reserve policy as a priority under the provide stewardship of our financial resources goal. And a city reserve policy is something that allows us, it's a sound business practice. It protects our fiscal solvency, and it gives us a better mechanism to budget from a staff perspective, because you have that reserve level set on what staff is supposed to set those reserves, and then being able to coordinate and develop a budget around that reserve. So again, the reserve policy is in front of you. We talk about the reserve policy looks at specifically your GFOA, your Government Financing Officers Association, and your GADSB, which is your Government Accounting Standard Boards, and looks at those best practices on how to develop a reserve policy. And that was how Chris and I developed this policy for you. And I'm going to let kind of Chris walk through the different elements of the reserve policy. And then if you have any other additional questions, I can join in and answer those questions.
So the reserve policy basically takes our unassigned fund balance for the general fund and provides a way that we would set aside in a reserve that fund balance. And so as part of that, there's two portions of it. There's 75% that becomes a now that I got to remember where I was at.
Economic uncertainty reserve.
Yeah, so that would be for if there was another pandemic. So there would be 75% set aside for economic downturn or a pandemic, and 25% is set aside separately in case there is an emergency that happens, maybe that we need to fix some road immediately, or air conditions break or something. And so we would come back at budget time and set the reserve, and we would try to set the reserve at 25% of the adjusted appropriations of the general fund. And that will allow us basically to have better planning for the future. We'll be able to plan better for things like the unfunded CalPERS liability, et cetera. And we would try to get, between that 25% would probably be the perfect number. But anytime the reserve falls below 15%, there would be a requirement to have a plan in place on how to pay that back. And if there's a 5-year period that we would have to make good to pay back the reserve back to the 15%. And so it becomes a tool basically for planning. And at next year's budget, when we do that, we would bring back our recommended reserve with budget.
So just a couple things to add. So right now, the city of Sonora has talked about having a reserve, and we talked about how it's not technically a reserve, it's your unassigned fund balance, because a reserve, a formal reserve, takes an actual formal action by the city council to hold those monies in a formal committal reserve. And by doing so, there are limitations in how you can utilize those monies. It declares that you have to have a proclaimed and declared emergency, or you can use those monies during budget time. So if you're going into budget, you've had an economic downturn, you can pull money out of those reserves to float your budget. Of course, you have to make findings to be able to utilize those reserves if you're dropping below a certain percentage, and set a plan in place to pay back those reserves. But allows, from a staff perspective, instead of just accumulating what the city of Sonora has been doing, is just accumulating and accumulating your fund balance, and there's no real plan in place on what that fund balance needs to be used for. So right now, our unassigned fund balance is about over 40% of your general fund appropriation, which is quite high from your GADSB and GFOA best practice. And we really need to be utilizing those unassigned fund balances to address certain capital assets, capital improvements, and other things. And that way, when you have that reserve set, you can utilize those additional unassigned fund balance to be put towards one-time purchases or one-time expenditures. And they're listed out in your fund balance reserve policy, such as establishing your contingency level in your budget itself, putting one-time monies towards your pension obligations, your OPEB obligations to pay down that unfunded liability, looking at unmet capital projects and capital improvements, and then also accrued employee leave. When we have employees that leave and they've accrued a fair amount of leave, sometimes that, from a cash flow perspective, that's a huge budget and cash flow issue. So this would allow us, from a budget standpoint, to be able to more accurately budget that unassigned fund balance.
Yeah, it becomes a planning tool, and when we come back with budget next year, we'll see where our fund balance lands, and then have a plan for, if there is excess, a plan for that excess.
And just one final note is, when you have an established reserve, your credit rating is a lot better because at any time the city would have to undertake any type of financial loan, or any type of what we call COPS, certificates of participations, or any type of financing problem. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but in the case and that does, you have to get a credit rating, a credit report of that. And having a reserve policy in place really adds to the financial solvency and the credit rating for the city of Sonora.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I just was waiting to make sure that the staff report was done. So the only, I totally agree that we need more codification of what we do for a reserve policy. The only real question I have is the percentages. Why 75-25? Why not 30? There's 66-33. Why not 50-50? Is that a recommendation from the Gatsby board and the GOA board?
GFOA does recommend those numbers.
Okay, so that's a typical.
Yes.
Yeah, as the sort of the the main line.
Yeah, just curious how you arrived at those numbers, and that satisfies my. Okay.
That was a question I had entertained earlier and had explained to me as a budgeting neophyte, and I still always want more because I'm in an industry and where temporary work is more is always better, but obviously in this these circumstances not. And we do have other of our, especially some of the obligations and unfunded liabilities to pay down, where this gives us the appropriate measure by which we want to do that, or should be wanting to do that. Like I say, I still want more, but that's not a good, that's not the best option. Yeah. So
there's a fine line. You don't want to have too much,
Yeah,
and then you don't.
You don't want to just save more and more, and then you allow buildings to deteriorate, or for instance, PD's cars are now getting older and older, and there's some need there, and then it does not help just to save the money.
Yes, yeah, so financial stewardship of the taxpayer money ensures that we also utilize the money to improve the situation for the taxpayers, which would require us to ensure that we're providing for our capital improvements, our facilities, our patrol vehicles, and so forth.
One of the things I'll throw out there, and I've told this to the public because it's still, to me, it's unbelievable being here as long as I have. We were one of the few entities in the whole state that didn't cut back either public safety or public works in the whole state. And if you start looking around, it's like, oh my gosh, and it's because we had a reserve policy.
We didn't have a reserve policy.
We had reserve, excuse me, sorry. We didn't have a reserve policy.
It's because we'd been very thrifty for a long time.
Yes, that's what I meant. Yep. And then with that, because we had a reserve, I know this is one of the things we've talked about is future councils. If we don't put a reserve policy in place, I know the state looks at that for one, but then two, who knows what future councils could decide, and at least this way we can say, hey, we have to have a savings account because there are bad days or bad years in the case of this last year. So,
and maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe next year. You never know.
I like to always say that you've got your general fund, which is your checking account. You've got your contingency in your general fund, which is your savings. And your reserve is your CD, yes. Because you can't pull those unless there are specific requirements. And so we want to make sure that we are holding and we're financially prudent to ensure when those are those tough economic downturns that we have those monies there. So that's how I kind of distinguish the three.
Cool. Well, this will certainly be an easier vote, I think, than the last one.
Yes, so, I endorse sound fiscal policy.
Okay, anyone else before I turn it over to public comment? Okay, then I will turn it over to public comment. We have 3 members of the public in here. So Darren, you were like in the bullseye right here. I'm just staring at you the whole time.
Okay. Thank you, Council. So I just wanted to offer support and also perhaps some additions to the policy. I think it's a fantastic step. The Government Finance Officers Association recently recognized, let me see which city it was. The city of Campbell for their new implementation of their financial policy. And after doing some research, there were some related items that I thought might be useful for Sonora. And so I just wanted to make those recommendations. So we have such a large budget or reserve that has been sitting, and we have some issues with maintenance of police cars and roads, et cetera, et cetera. I think it would be greatly beneficial to add two different aspects to the policy. The first one would be, sorry, I gotta move here a little bit. Add some guiding principles and objectives. I think it would be really beneficial to add in, aside from the emergency use and such, use a special objective of finance new capital assets. As we're talking about potentially growing, like, you know, housing and such on, this could also be used as a potential banking model that could go, you know, for long-term loan of sorts, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Also, to safeguard and maintain existing assets. So that's just objective-wise, and then for the actual bread and butter, categories. So something that I think would be really helpful is, instead of having two different categories that are just emergency and then everything else, is to divide it within 5 different categories: working capital, opportunity, dedicated revenue sources, risk mitigation, and planned capital spending. So what that would help with is that with specific projects, we could see, you know, how much you know, budget and issues might come ahead of time. So we would create more transparency in how that money is spent. Now, one of the limitations, if we were to do that, is that, you know, one might say we don't have the flexibility now to address certain issues. And so to combat that, we could also add the condition that those monies could be loaned internally and laterally. So if a certain department needs it, you know, they can again present to the council, approve through the council, and then give that money. So that money could still be fluctuating where it need be, but there would be an increased transparency for the public to see how it's happening. Furthermore, if a surplus is still maintained, if we see that certain departments, you know, are not accessing those funds, maybe those funds can be used for development as per the objectives that I was saying. So it creates a little bit, it doesn't really do much more than create transparency and a little bit more organization. It's a little bit more work up front, but I think for the effects of what it does, it could be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo. Anyone else? Okay, then I'll bring it back to the council. Any other council members want to ask any questions?
No, I'm just kind of digesting what Pablo just had to say. I think a lot of that, I think if I can break it down a little bit, and see if I can interpret that, I think it's basically having fund balances in the budget, and
It's more like a fiscal, it's more like on how you develop the budget.
yeah,
framework
it's not so
instead
much
of the reserve.
yeah, and I can understand what you're doing. The county does that. They have
Yeah.
several funds, set funds, more than the city does. And people know that there's so much in the fire fund, there's so much in the ambulance fund, there's so much in the, and I think that's, if I'm interpreting that right, I think that's kind of what you're advocating. Well, I am asking him a question, so
Yeah.
isn't that how you?
Unfortunately, you know, the public comment in it.
So I can address that for you.
Okay.
Okay, well, let me finish real quick. If the council wants to open it back up, I don't have an issue with that. But once the public comment ends, that's where, even if the questions are
Okay,
asked.
There's only.
my question
But
is
it's fine by me.
germane
I
to,
don't
is
care.
it germane to
People, I
our
don't think-
question?
Yeah.
What's that?
Is it germane to our question? Because while I find it interesting,
Well, maybe we could get his opinion or his
Okay.
comment, answer to it, whether
Okay.
he's thinking more of a
I'm
budgetary
fine,
process or if he's thinking more of a reserve process
Okay.
or both.
If the-
And that would be
Because-
germane.
Okay.
If the council's okay with it, we can open up
Sure.
public comment again.
well,
I just-
it is Jim asking the question.
Yeah.
so-
Okay, so
I'm fine with letting him.
Clet and Ann, you're cool?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to, Pablo, please come back up. I just want to make sure we're legally okay.
He's not a free agent, but.
So to answer the question, Councilmember Garaventa, it is in some aspects. So what the city of Campbell did was, like you said, you know, like our county does, have specific budgetary divisions, but within the reserve fund specifically, they also did that. And so the benefit of that is that, again, even though there is a set budget, oftentimes small one-time emergency exposures happen, right? Like maybe there is a vehicle malfunction that's beyond the budget, right? So that one-time expenditure can be afforded. So again, it doesn't create any additions that are meaningful in the sense of steps to be taken or things that limitations for it. It just creates a structure for it to be easier to analyze and followed by the public. So it's purely for transparency reasons.
Okay, all right, cool.
And I just got to throw out there, I love picking your brain. The couple conversations we've had, they've been, and you and I can disagree, but we can keep it very amicable and understand each other, and I really appreciate that. I wanted to tell you that publicly too, so.
So just for the council members, so unlike the county, we do not have multiple funds, multiple state and federal funding sources. The majority of our funds are general funds, sales tax, revenue generated funds. And through our budgetary process, the council approves the disbursement of that general fund to each department at the level they see fit to fund. So we don't have the ability really to pull from other funds to fund other departments because that's already done from a budgetary perspective. From my perspective, we're trying to start out a little bit slow right now. We don't have any fiscal policy on the books right now. And so even getting us to a contingency best practice level of about 3% of your overall general fund appropriation is where Chris and I would really like to see that. That's going to take building, and that general fund appropriation is kind of what contingency appropriation is what Paulo was kind of alluding to, is you set that contingency within your budget. So when you have a police vehicle, because our insurance right now is through the roof on police vehicles, and we need to replace them, we can pull from that contingency to replace those types of items that aren't generally thought about when you're budgeting. So that's not something that the city has ever budgeted for previously. That's something that we are starting to do. And then from a reserve policy standpoint, because again, we have not ever had any type of reserve policy, we're starting out slow, and then we're going to start bringing forth additional financial policies to the council as we go. One of the goals that Chris and I have set for ourselves is hopefully here within the next couple of years, we can reach that GFOA excellence in budgeting, so we can get that. But these are the building blocks to be able to get that excellence in budgeting.
And part of the reserve policy, the 25% is a target, and it's split between the two different, pools of money. But anything in addition to the 25% that is unassigned reserve, we would set aside at budget time, for accrued liabilities for vacation balance or for some building improvement or whatever it is.
Mhm.
So there would be several different pots potentially
Mhm.
at budget time when the reserve policy is brought.
Right.
Cool.
So there'd be a line in the budget.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that would be contingency for whatever if we had those monies, is what you're
Use
saying.
of
So it'd
fund
be
balance.
transparent in the budget.
Yeah, so there would be a
Yes.
line that would say use of fund balance. It would show we're utilizing this amount left of fund balance and it's being budgeted towards X, Y, and Z.
Okay, okay.
Anyone else?
If there's no further comment, I would like to move to approve a City of Sonora General Fund Reserve Policy.
As presented.
As presented, yes, thank you. Mr. Mayor ex
Okay.
officio.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Plummer and second by Councilmember Sagestrom. Looking for a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Hawkins?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Plummer?
Aye.
Councilmember Garaventa?
Aye.
Councilmember Sagerstrom?
Aye.
And Councilmember Such?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. On to council member and department head reports. I will look back at our chief of police. Thank you. Rochelle, anything for us? I bet you don't have anything for us tonight.
Oh, don't we have an event coming up?
I think an
this
event might be
weekend?
coming up.
Magic of the Night Friday night.
Yay!
The event will be from 6 to 9 in downtown. So we have a poster that's going out downtown. We had little cards that went out first. Now this will tell everybody we're all at all the venues on what's available. It's on our website. Again, it'll be going downtown. We also have posters that we have made that allow the merchants to have a night special for Magic of the Night. And so they can fill in that poster on what they want to do that night. So it's from 6 to 9. It starts down by the Yosemite Tidal with the Corvette Club, and it goes all the way up to the Red Church, with bands and music in between and some other entertainment. We have the fire dancers back in the park in the evening. We have the Motherlode Antique Auto Club around at the park as well on Jackson Street. And then other things, we have a magician that'll be wandering up and down the street as well. And then the volunteer fire department will be having their tri-tip sandwiches up at the fire museum. And we'll have a band there as well. So anyway, that's Friday night from 6 to 9 in downtown Sonora. So I want to let you guys know.
Yay! Thank you, Rochelle. Okay, our city finance director.
So we were selected by the California Department of Finance to have our CARES Act money audited. And we were selected. Yeah, they're only selecting specific or very few, in fact,
Lucky.
Agencies. And we were deemed to be in full compliance. And that is at $58,000 that we received.
Great. Okay. City attorney first, and then I'll call you. Sorry. City attorney.
An easy one tonight, Mayor. Nothing more tonight.
Excellent. Mary Rose.
Nothing else to report.
Okay, we'll start with Councilmember Sagestrom.
Hey, I'm back from vacation. After the last meeting, I attended the Western Drought Monitor. Bad news, higher than normal weather through October, no rainfall in sight. It doesn't, long-term doesn't look good. Sorry to report. I also attended the T. Stan Irwin tour of the Murphy Sanitary District, which was really very interesting. That's one of the members of the T. Stan Irwin JPA. And I learned a lot more about sewage than I ever knew. And then I listened to the Board of Supervisors meeting about the input for their $10 million of American stimulus money. And it was very interesting. And I think the city, is somewhat reflected in all of the their department requests. Everybody's down, but hopefully new infusion, we can roar back. So I toured the new courthouse. Man, that was too bad for anybody who missed that. It was quite spectacular, and a lovely use of local marble. And a point that I might bring up on Wednesday in Park and Recreation. I went to Coffee with a Cop, and it was nice to reintroduce myself to the police force. And I just wish more public could take advantage of that. The mayors and council members from Cal Cities, that was also interesting to see how many cities are going back to Zoom meetings. And how they were using their Recovery Act funds. And also they mentioned the upcoming Cal Cities conference, which I don't know, in this COVID revival, what a great idea it is to get together with 1,200 people from all over the state. But then I went to the Energy Action Committee meeting, and right now, there's kind of a deadlock with the Sierra Business Council, so I will report on any updates probably in a month. I went to the Sonora Christmas Town meeting, and right now it looks like unified lighting up and down the main street is not in the budget. That came in at about $100,000, but they got a county okay to do Christmas Tree Lane in Courthouse Park. I believe the skating rink is still a go, and they will also participate in the national tree arrival on November 3rd, which should be rather gala. Also, I just wanted to mention across the street tomorrow, also pizza will be opening. And if you're a fan of Union Coffee, Union Hill Coffee, I think their pizza parlor will be a smashing success as well. So that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Such.
Thanks. Let's see, I attended a virtual Water Alliance Now conference, and much like Ann's report, they talked a lot about drought, but also about water resource management and ways to handle water for our new future. I also, or our new normal, I guess. I also attended the Fire Safe Council meeting. It's the first time we've had a meeting in, I think, since pre-COVID. But a lot of really, really good work is being done by that group that they were reporting on, making shaded fuel breaks around certain communities, and also talked to the person who's in charge of fire safe communities. So I will be talking to you, Ann, and you, Jim, again about Myers Hill.
Right. And Julie Johnson.
And Julie Johnson, yeah, she's very involved with that. But and there's money, there's grant money out to help with that. I think it would be really nice to get to just get some work started on all these hills that make Sonora so beautiful. Social Equity Committee met. I just want to say that the Social Equity Committee members never talk about critical race theory. I don't think that we have brought that up even once in all these months. It is brought up by the public, both people who think we should talk about it and people who don't think we should talk about it. But the committee itself has never ever talked about critical race theory. I also went on the T-Stan Irwin sewage plant tour, and I never thought that something so critical could also be so basic. It's really, it was interesting to see how we managed that. And Irwin actually provided money for a recent an upgrade in the last couple of years for them. That was nice to hear about. And also, I did go on the courthouse tour. It's a very, very different courthouse than the one downtown. And I'm sad about losing the courthouse downtown, but I get it. It really is coming up to date, and it's a 2021 courthouse. And I think the judges and the community will be well served there. That's it from me. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Sudge. Councilmember Garaventa.
Yeah, a question first for Councilmember Sagstrom. You mentioned I don't know if rift is the right word, but there's some sort of conflict or something between Sierra Business Council and.
No, it wasn't really a conflict. I think it was, the committee is kind of, at least, we have a rudder and Charles Sagerstrom, and he was attending to his wife who was having heart surgery, so he was not available. But the Sierra Business Council representative at the meeting indicated that the Business Council was kind of setting the committee adrift, and that they had kind of fulfilled their obligation. And I did talk to Charles about it, and he said he would be talking to the Sierra Business Council about it because he is on that board. So it was very inconclusive because most of the members are they're on an advisory kind of capacity with not much ability to actually take action. So it's one of those things where our workhorse, our wheel horse, has got to go kind of figure out what's going on with Sierra Business Council so that we can actually implement some of the plans that we put together for energy resilience.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And for my report, the only thing that I think I've attended since the last meeting was, of course, the Social Equity Committee as well. And I would like to echo what Colette had said. It's people when they do public comment are bringing up the term critical race theory and talking about it. the last few, and we haven't, as a committee, haven't been talking about it at all. Basically, what we've been working on the last at least 3 sessions is the resolution. So, you know, and we're not putting critical race theory into the resolution. So, or at least I don't think so. That's certainly, I would, you know, it's not where we're going. But yeah, it's people bringing it up. We're not discussing it or, you know, trying to implement it or anything like that. So that's it for me.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
If I could respond to that, I would contend that much of the public finds that any use of the term equity is putting the critical race theory into practice, and that is what the public is probably seeing and referring to. And I would concur with that myself. That said, Access to Tuolumne is going through some changes. I attended their one may have noticed their new van. Well, their van has been.
Microphone.
I thought I'd pushed it. Thank you. Sorry about that. So, Access to Tuolumne van has been, what is it called when it's plastic covered?
Wrapped.
Wrapped. It's been wrapped and is very attractive. You will probably see it attending different events. It's pretty cool. It's incredible on one side. The other side to me looks a little kind of vague, but I've never taken drugs, so maybe it's better if you have. Anyway,
Okay.
no, I mean, it's attractive. It's just that it's vague. So they are going through some changes that the county is going to be talking about and deciding if they are going to change the relationship between Access to Tuolumne and the county. Some of those possibilities may influence the city and our relationship with them, or at least give that potential. So you might want to listen in on the county discussions when they come up, or even speak to that. It will be interesting. And one way or another, the county is probably going to be taking a big step in assuring a better financial or more secure financial and business standing and model for Access to Tuolumne. And so we'll see where they go on that. It'll be interesting, but often I don't talk about their meetings when it's just a regular meeting. This will impact the city, and it's something that we'll want to keep an eye on. Yes, sir.
I believe that, and I'll look to see
Yes.
if Supervisor Goldenberg is still here, if he could nod or not. I understand that the meeting that they're going to talk about this is on the 10th. Is that correct? Or do you know? I'm not sure. Okay. That's what I heard from Jerry.
Okay.
So
That I glanced at that email, so I can't really say at this point.
Okay.
I should have, because
right.
now it puts me in an awkward position. But I didn't think it was this next meeting. I believe it's a week out. So it will be interesting. Pay attention if you're not on fires. And with that, I think that pretty well covers it.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I would like to see, and I guess we had talked about bringing something else earlier back here before the council. Was it
we were talking about the ways that the discussion of ways to find regular rental properties.
Yes.
And
So-
attracting low development of low-income housing, developers.
So, and Mary Rose is looking at me too. So I would like to see something like that come back. I just want to get a consensus of the council when we could see something come back in the future.
So just so the council's aware, we are still working full-fledged on the encroachment process and the doing away, or not the doing away, but the repealing of the urgency ordinance of the special outdoor use permit. So that's taking quite a bit of time from that perspective. I would hope the council would allow us to finish that process first before agendizing another big, because that would be a big undertaking to look at all of those, that information.
Absolutely.
That-
So sometime in the future, the council, in the next couple months.
Is that what you're thinking?
No, that's way too early.
Okay.
So let's see what we can do. We'll come up with a timeline because I agree that this needs to come back before the council, but we need to complete jobs before we start more. So, one thing I did want to see come back before the council, and I've heard it's not going to be popular when I say it, but there's been some issues with the equity committee. I'm not getting into it, but I know that one thing was killed off the agenda, the last equity committee, and there's a couple other little things I think that the council ought to take a look at when it comes to agenda posting and timing. And then also I talked to a member of the public who had some really good ideas about basically no one getting talked over, or no one getting talked over, time allotted for different members to speak. And I would like to discuss more of that, and maybe the council may have to set something for this, but basically so we can have a little bit more clear-cut time when the agenda needs to be posted, that sort of thing, so that city staff is not put on edge or put in essentially in the crossfire. I don't want to see that happen, but I'd like to see something like that agendized so that things will run a little more smoothly, because I still, and the committee's been going, what, 9 months now? Jim, Colette? The 9 months, a year?
September.
Yeah, so we're looking at a year and we still haven't had a resolution. I'm not criticizing any of that, but I would like to see a little bit of reporting on what is going on, how we're attaining that, and we can give our constituents what we told them we would give them. So I think we should do a few of these without debating critical race theory, but basically, what's going on. I'm wanting to know. I've kind of watched some of the meetings, but I want to know what's going on. And then, of course, we got 2 council members on that committee, and I'd like to hear their thoughts also. So can we have this come up in the next meeting or 2 meetings? Is there a consensus?
I'm fine on bringing it up. I'm expecting that I may well be absent.
Okay.
Or maybe if I'm fortunate, I'll be able to Zoom in. But
I mean, I'll be honest with you. One of the committee members obviously spoke earlier. I would like to find out a reason for that. But again, I'm not going to break any Brown Act. So I would like to know more. I'd like to know what's going on. So
I would like to see it come up for further discussion. I think it's warranted. And I mean, here we are approaching a year for a resolution that should have taken maybe 3 meetings to wordsmith. So
with that, Colette, are you okay with that? We can bring it back up and talk about that?
It's yes, we certainly, I think the council has every right to bring it back up. I just want to remind people that the resolution was one of 7 objectives that we had. We didn't just start out to write a resolution. It is, I will admit, the most important.
Well,
Yeah,
if it takes us 7 years to get through it, that's going to be sort of Promethean work.
Well, there's that, and agenda postings and stuff like that. I would actually like to have an open discussion and see if there's, some bullet points that we can put down that we can accomplish and maybe make it easier on city staff. But I would like to see the open discussion come back forward. So if 3, 4 of us are okay with that, I'm kind of looking to you too, Jim. So,
Colette said yes.
No, wait a minute, Jim, I can't hear you.
I said, you said yes, so I'll go ahead and say yes too.
Well, I don't, I just think the council has a right to bring this back. It's not, if the intention is to criticize it, I'm not going to put a target on my back. I don't know.
That's not been my intent. If I wouldn't have criticized you, I'll tell you. And I think I've been pretty straightforward earlier in the meeting, but I would like to see this brought back forward. I think there's a few things that we need to hammer out, and if this committee keeps going, what the council decides, whatever. But I think there's a few things we need to get some answers for. Plain and simple.
I'm not sure the next council meeting is the best, maybe 2 council meetings from now.
Yeah, I don't think the next council meeting, but sometime the first part of September.
We're in the middle of working on the resolution, so we may have something
and if it
farther along than, so.
That'll be good. So sometime early September? I'm not looking for confrontation here. I'm just trying to
So right
find
now I
out
have the
that,
direction to bring back a social equity item for an update to the council on September 7th.
yes.
I'm hearing at least 3, direction from 3. Okay.
Okay. So with that, again, now got all that done with. I just want to thank our public that has came to the meetings. It's less now because some did leave. And then I just want to thank Sonora for being so awesome. We really live in such a really cool little town. So with that, the meeting is over with at 6:35.